In the shadow of the Second World War, amid the ruins of cities and the trauma of total defeat, a revealing statistic emerged that continues to provoke reflection. In a 1948 survey conducted in the Western Allied zones of occupied Germany, 57% of respondents agreed with the statement that National Socialism was a good idea, poorly implemented. This is a staggering figure, not only because it reflects a refusal to fully condemn a regime responsible for initiating the deadliest conflict in human history, but also because it provides a window into the psychology and political attitudes of ordinary Germans in the immediate post-war period. This blog explores the deeper meaning of this finding, what it tells us about post-war German society, how it shaped the political and cultural landscape of the early Federal Republic, and why it's essential to understand such sentiments in the broader context of collective memory, denial, and historical reckoning. The 1948 survey was part of a series of public opinion studies commissioned by the Allied occupation authorities in Germany. After 1945, the Allies were not just rebuilding a country physically destroyed by war. They were also trying to re-educate and denazify a society that had, to varying degrees, supported or tolerated a genocidal dictatorship. Understanding the public's mindset was therefore crucial. The question posed, whether National Socialism was a good idea that was poorly implemented, wasn't just a matter of curiosity. It was meant to probe how deeply ingrained Nazi ideology remained in the German population, and whether people were prepared to move forward with a commitment to democracy and denazification. The answer was sobering. More than half of respondents said yes. The appeal of the idea that Nazism was poorly implemented but otherwise sound reflects several overlapping motivations and beliefs. Desire to salvage national pride. In 1948, Germany was a defeated and occupied nation. Millions had died. Cities were rubble, and the country was split into zones controlled by foreign powers. For many, National Socialism had offered a vision of national resurgence, unity, and economic recovery during the chaos of the Weimar Republic. By claiming that the idea was good but that the execution failed, many Germans could cling to a sense of national pride, stripped of Hitler's excesses, without confronting the full moral failure of the regime. Denial and self-exoneration. The answer also allowed individuals to distance themselves from the atrocities committed in their name. By focusing criticism on poor implementation, respondents implied that the core ideology was sound. They had simply been led astray by a few bad actors or flawed decisions. This kind of rationalization is a common psychological defense mechanism, especially in societies emerging from collective trauma and guilt. Ignorance or minimization of the Holocaust. While some Germans were undoubtedly aware of the regime's crimes, many claimed ignorance of the Holocaust, and many more minimized its scale or significance. In 1948, the full horror of the concentration camps was still being processed. For people focused on survival, these horrors may have felt distant or abstract, something that happened somewhere else and not part of their immediate lived experience. Longing for stability and order, National Socialism, particularly in its early years, had brought order to a society racked by economic depression, political extremism, and social fragmentation. For some Germans, the Nazi period was associated not with violence and terror, but with jobs, social programs, and national unity. In this view, the ideology itself seemed appealing. It was only the war and genocide that had ruined it. This widespread ambivalence toward Nazism, neither full endorsement nor outright rejection, had long-lasting consequences for post-war Germany. It shaped the early years of the Federal Republic of Germany, or West Germany, in profound ways. Superficial denazification. The Allies initiated a program of denazification after the war, aimed at purging Nazi influence from government, education, and civil society. However, the process quickly lost momentum. As Cold War tensions escalated, the Western Allies prioritized rebuilding West Germany as a bulwark against Soviet communism. Stability and expertise were needed, and many of those with administrative experience under the Nazis were quietly allowed back into positions of influence. Former Nazi Party members became judges, police officers, teachers, and politicians once more. The public's lingering sympathy for National Socialism made deep and meaningful denazification politically unfeasible. After all, how do you purge a society when more than half of it still sees the ideology as fundamentally sound? In the 1950s, Germany experienced the beginnings of the Wirtschaftswunder, or economic miracle, a period of rapid recovery and growth. This newfound prosperity gave many Germans a reason, and an excuse, to avoid looking backward. The war and the crimes of the Nazi regime became taboo topics in public discourse and private life alike. This silence was compounded by shame. Many Germans were ashamed of their country's defeat, of their own possible complicity, or of having been duped by Hitler. But rather than confronting that shame, they buried it. And with it, the memory of millions who had perished. The burden passed to the next generation. In the 1960s and 70s, a younger generation, raised in a democratic West Germany but aware of its origins, began to challenge their parents and teachers. They asked hard questions. What did you do during the war? Did you know about the camps? Why didn't you resist? This reckoning culminated in events like the 1968 student protests and the broader cultural shift toward confronting the Holocaust and Germany's past more honestly. But the groundwork for this confrontation was laid in the silence and denial of 1948. Was Nazism ever a good idea? The very notion that National Socialism could be a good idea reflects a fundamental misunderstanding, or willful ignorance, of its core tenets. Even before the outbreak of war, even before the camps became factories of death, Nazism was built on a foundation of racial hierarchy and anti-Semitism, suppression of dissent and press freedom, militarism and expansionism, and the glorification of violence and the Führerprinzip, or leader principle. It was never simply a nationalist or conservative ideology gone astray. It was radical, totalitarian, and genocidal from the start. The idea that it was poorly implemented suggests that, had it been managed better, the ideology could have produced a just or admirable society. But this notion ignores the fact that its very aims, racial purity, domination of Europe, and the eradication of undesirables, were criminal in both intent and execution. The 1948 survey is not just a historical curiosity, it holds lessons for today about the dangers of nostalgia, the ease with which societies can rationalize violence, and the importance of historical accountability. Across the world, we see resurgences of authoritarianism, nationalism, and xenophobia. We see people defending or romanticizing oppressive regimes by claiming they were good ideas that simply went off course. The German experience shows us where that kind of thinking can lead, and how long it can take to undo. That 57% of Germans in 1948 still saw National Socialism as a good idea poorly executed is a sobering reminder of how difficult and how essential it is to reckon with a dark past. It underscores that the end of a regime does not automatically bring about the end of its ideology. Ideas linger, myths endure, denial takes root. But facing uncomfortable truths is the only path toward real healing and genuine democracy. Germany eventually undertook that journey, imperfectly, and only after years of silence, but it has become a model for historical responsibility. That journey began with uncomfortable facts like the one revealed in that 1948 survey. Acknowledging those facts, even years later, remains an act of moral and civic necessity.